Hello and welcome. I'm Matt Hodgson. I'm the co-founder and managing director of Grape Britannia, the premier specialist in English and Welsh wines. I'm delighted to be joined by Ruth and Charles Simpson of Simpson's Wine Estate down in Kent. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's really great to have you on here. You're absolutely one of my favourite English wine estates, so it's it's so good to have the chance to talk to you. And today the focus is going to be on the 2020 vintage. We can talk, of course, about your history and all the years that have led up to 2020. But I thought it'd be nice to have a bit of a focus on the most recent vintage, which actually has been quite an exceptional vintage. I think we produce a vintage report that is contributed to by about 20 different vineyards, and we've heard great things across the board. But I understand from your vintage report that 2020 was a rather good year for you too.
Yes, I mean, it was. Obviously, one of the biggest risks for growing grapes and making wine in this country is frost. And actually, when we sought our vineyard sites, we thought we were relatively frost-free. What we've discovered is that we're so warm and so close to the sea that we get bud break early. And of course, the downside of that, as you know, Matt, is that you're much more exposed to frosts than oftentimes other vineyards would be. So our issue there was that we got quite heavily frosted this year. Also, 2020 was a year of heavy frost. But what that did was making incredibly concentrated fruit. So there was this natural, what the French would call vendage en vert, so a green harvest. So what we've discovered is that it was actually impeccable for producing still wines. So you've got that natural reduction in buds and therefore reduction in bunches, therefore sugar ripeness. And so I would say probably 2020 was our best year in terms of still wine production. The accountant in me is not very happy because the yields were significantly down, but the upside is we made some fantastic still wines.
Okay, no, well, that's great to hear, and that's what we're going to be trying today, because obviously it being 2020, your sparklings are still a little way off being released. But I think I read in your report your volumes are something like 22% down last year, although your ratio, I think, has shifted from about a third still wine up to a half. So in terms of the quantity of 2020 still wine, hopefully there's still a little bit to go around, although I'm sure demand is going to be exceptionally high for it.
And actually, just looking over at the provenance piece, one of the things that we believe at Simpson's Wine Estate is that wines ought to have a sense of place, and so much so that we have concentrated only vineyards in the Elam Valley. So there's an upside in the fact that there's a real purity and an honesty to the wines that we make here. The downside is you are operating in the same geographic area. So if you have these agricultural incidences, it affects both parcels. So it's the sad reality that we're hit on both sides.
Yeah, well, as you say, at least the frost incidents actually had a little bit of upside for you in 2020. So let's hold on to that thought. And right, should we try the 2020 wines then? So we got 4 today that we're going to talk about. So we've got your 2 Chardonnays, the Gravel Castle Chardonnay and then the Roman Road Chardonnay. And then we're going to also try your Railway Hill Rosé and the Rabbit Hole Pinot Noir. So we're starting with the Gravel Castle Chardonnay. Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. Lovely shot. Saved me from having to put it in front of the screen there.
Doing your job, boy.
Thank you so much. So
I guess the background on this, first of all, to say is the preamble for all of these still wines is that when Ruth and I invested in the UK and England, we vowed that we'd never make still wines. Our goal was entirely sparkling. And what was a real surprise to us is actually suitability, particularly this part of East Kent, for still wines. We are really warm over in this part, again, surrounded by the sea on 3 sides. And actually, one of the decisions that Ruth and I made early on in our planting cycle was to not only plant the Champagne clones, but also the Burgundian still wine clones. So it was really in our first harvest that we were picking each of the clones individually for, again, meta-traditional sparkling wines. What we discovered is naturally the still Burgundian clones just had this varietal honesty that we just didn't expect. And that gave us, encouraged us really to try and push the limits again in 17 And then finally in 2018, we realized it wasn't a fluke, that we could actually repeat this again and again and again. And then we introduced these range of still wines. So this is our entry-level Chardonnay called Gravel Castle. It comes from a mixture of our 2 vineyard sites. So one of our sites is called Roman Road, and we've got a wine called that at the moment, and a site called Rabbit Hole. So this is a combination of fruit that comes off both sites. And it is 2 Chardonnay clones. So it's clone 96 and clone 548. Both of those are Burgundian still wine clones. Now, one of the things that we do, which is quite unique, and I think we only have 1 of 2, actually 2 or 3 oxygen-free presses in the UK. So we can actually, in our press cycle, we can actually press without oxygen. And what that does, particularly with something like Chardonnay, is it stops oxidation and therefore gives you, in the fermentation cycle, much more citrus characters. Yeah. But we have an option to turn that gas off, Matt. So we end up at the end of the harvest with tanks that are very citrus in their dominance and then tropical in their dominance. So really Gravel Castle is that combination of citrus and tropical type fruits. It is an on-oak style, but really it is the chalk downs of the North Downs that really rings through in this wine. It's got a lovely minerality and purity on the nose. Again, those sort of citrus and tropical characters. And the best way I could describe this is it's Chablis, but it's Kent Chablis.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's sort of inevitable, isn't it, that people look to comparators internationally, and absolutely for me, this really is, as you say, the English or Kentish Chablis. It's got that intensity and purity and trueness of the fruit, doesn't it? Those citrus notes really coming through. Also, a little bit of maybe some sort of ripe orchard fruit, a little hint of pear in there, perhaps as well. And as you say, no oak in there, but I think it's had a little bit of time on lees, hasn't it? It's just given a little bit of a roundness to it. I mean, it's not a big fat wine by any means. It's got, beautiful freshness and zing and minerality to it. Yeah. It's got just a little bit of rounding out, I think, from some of that lees aging.
The salinity to it as well that obviously makes it pair so well with things like fish. It's got this real salinity that runs throughout it, and actually interesting that you pick up on the whole complexity and mouthfeel. It's one of the things when we started drinking still wines in the UK that we felt missing, was that it's very aromatic up front, but it lacks the mid and back palate a lot of the wines on the market. So we work tirelessly with lees aging and just working the wines to try and build up the layers of that mid and back palate, which ultimately make food-friendly wines.
Definitely. And what would be your sort of perfect pairings for your Gravel Castle?
Well, given our proximity to the sea and you picked up even just a little bit of salinity in the flavour profile as well. I mean, we have sea on 3 sides. We're so far east, about as far east as you can get. So I mean, for us, we would, perfect pairings for us. We have Whitstable about 10 miles to the north of us, so with freshly shelled Whitstable oysters. That shellfish really it's really made for, but because of that textured palate, it also compared beautifully with cheese. And a couple of our local Kentish favourites would be Chaucer's Camembert, the Bowyer's Brie. So ultimately it's got a bit of flexibility as to how and what you want to pair it with as well.
Yeah, definitely. And say it's kind of made in that style that it's got to have that freshness and that absolute salinity, minerality that gives it the zip and zing to it. So I mean, I guess you have to be careful about when you pick the grapes as well, the sort of optimal level of ripeness for this style of wine. So when did you pick the grapes for the Gravel Castle in 2020? Because it was really hot September, was it? Did you find yourself picking earlier than normal, or was it normal?
Actually, we'd end up picking a bit later because of the frost damage and how long it might take just to concentrate the flavours a little more. But actually, because the yields were so low, it did mean that we were picking a little bit earlier. But it certainly wasn't into September. It was really about the second week of October, because ultimately with the still wines, you do want to leave it hanging as long as possible, so you do pick up the maximum, that concentration of flavour and the sugars that is ultimately going to convert into a palatable, balanced still wine.
Absolutely. And maybe that takes us onto the Roman Road then as well, because that's your other Chardonnay, as you said, and it's slightly contrasting in style. I mean, I think it sort of it has a Simpson style to it. You can see the connection with the Gravel Castle, but it's just a different interpretation, a different way of working with your Chardonnay grapes, isn't it?
It is, yes. And I mean, the Roman Road has really developed over that's the fourth vintage of our Roman Road. So we actually, we in our very first vintage in 2016, that was the first year that we made a Roman Road. And ultimately it was a slightly different, a slightly lighter style because we bottled it earlier. It had less time actually in oak and maturing and spending time on lees. So, so ultimately, when we in 2018, when we had slightly more volume of grapes, we set about expanding our still wine range. We decided with the Roman Road we really wanted to elevate it, and it is a single varietal, single vineyard wine. So it all comes from our Roman Road site, which is the site we planted first in 2015. And it's all made from the clone 548, as Charles mentioned earlier, the Burgundian still wine clone. Now, this is more white Burgundy. This is more akin to areas a little bit further south than Chablis. So it's very much more, it's designed to have a bit more body, a bit more weight. I mean, with this Chardonnay, we do try and leave it. This is the last grapes that we pick in the vineyard because we need to have it pick up that concentration and the sugars.
Yeah.
So, and then ultimately, it's about 25% barrel fermentation. As Charles mentioned, the Inertis press previously, so we're actually using a combination of some protective juice, some non-protective juice to give it a little bit more body and weight, really topical notes. And then it has spent 4 or 5 months in French oak barrels. But actually not 100% of it, because you still want to, again, you're not trying to mask the wonderful fruit flavors.
Yeah, because it has got that glorious fruit which you want to sing out as well. Is it sort of second, third use French oak, or is it new?
Yeah, second. Yeah. And some of the barrels we will experiment with indigenous yeast, which gives interesting nuanced characters that you wouldn't see in synthesized yeast. Can be a little bit dangerous. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. So we'd always do those sort of experiments in barrels. Whereas the Gravel Castle, we would not, risk that character. With Roman Road, we're certainly playing on the indigenous yeast, and that brings out a degree of complexity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got, it's got a bit more of the tropical fruit side to it.
Yeah.
Still got the citrus in there at the back of it, of course. But there's wonderful notes from the oak in there, sort of, hint of vanilla or even butterscotch to it. Still with, critically that sort of classic English acidity to lift it and keep it, fresh and zippy as well.
Yeah. Well, that's always the balance. It's just making sure that, clearly we want this to be a different style to the Gravel Castle, so they're very distinct, characters on their own. But then, a lot of people will put off Chardonnay in the early days by over-oaking. So it has to be done with a light hand.
Yeah, and clearly your masters that. I mean, your 2018 Roman Road won decanter best in show, didn't it? So you clearly got that right in 2018, and I'm pretty sure the 2020 is going to do very well as well. But we'll see. I guess
it's one of those dilemmas, though, Matt. The reality is, because there's such pent-up demand for these wines, we're releasing them. But something like the Roman Road, has it's going to age so gracefully. So if you brave, buy a case, put it down, and sit on it for a couple of years, because it's only going to evolve.
I know this is one thing I'm not very good at. It all gets drunk far too young. But I think you're right. I mean, this must have 10 years in it, right? It's a wine that's definitely got all the components in there. It's got absolutely enough fruit. It's got the structure, including from the oak, and then the acidity. So it'd be really interesting to see how it develops and evolves over this, if you can restrain yourself from broaching the bottles. Exactly. Good. Okay. All right. Well, that's your Chardonnays, and then next up we have your Railway Hill Rosé. And thank you very much indeed for sharing this with us. I'm trying to put the bottle in front of the screen this time, not quite as gracefully as you did, Charles, but there we have this bottle. I really do want to show this bottle because it is a Lovely, lovely bottle. Tell us a little bit about the bottle before we go into the wine. Tell us a bit about the bottle,
Yes,
actually.
so this is a very elegant bottle that they call Eleanor, but probably what makes it even more unique is how we close it. So we use a technology called Vinalock, and one of the reasons we're able to do this, again, part of our experience down in southern France is our French bottler drives all the way up to Kent, 1,000 kilometers, to bottle this for us. To successfully bottle under Vinalock, you need to basically sparge the bottle with nitrogen. So you need to have a generator that can generate enough nitrogen to do that. And if you do that, you get the same oxygen-free or anaerobic qualities as screw cap. So what's wonderful about these bottles is, one, you can reseal them. Unfortunately, we'll go and grab your stopper. So there you go. So you can have a glass. You can put the stopper back on, and you can actually sit it on its side, and that you can ruin your carpet.
There we go, magic.
So it's really good from that perspective. Ecologically, the nice thing is that everything's entirely glass, so it's entirely recyclable. And what's quite nice, if you have this out in a restaurant, it's something that people hopefully can take home with them to remember Simpsons. So what we tried to do was really push the limits, because again, English wine is not cheap. It shouldn't be. And is aspirational in terms of what we're trying to do here, but we very much felt that the packaging was letting a lot of the still wines down.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of my big bugbears, actually, about the industry, that people often have these rather lovely wines in some rather, frankly, ugly or at least anonymous packaging. So yes, absolutely.
So if we're expecting people to pay top pound for this, we want it to look the part. And very much, I guess, from our southern French days, drinking, Provençal rosé, on the beaches, it becomes this really wonderful thing people want on their table, want to be seen. It's very Instagrammable, of the moment.
Absolutely.
So so this is our Railway Hill, again, one of our vineyard sites. And the reason we called it Railway Hill is the light railway that used to run from Canterbury down to Folkestone ran through this particular field, which is now our vineyard. Even though we talk about it being a Provençal style rosé, we more refer to that as in terms of the color map. So, it's a light, crisp, pure rosé, but it's 100% Pinot Noir, which would obviously be different than, what we would expect, in Provence. And it comes from it's actually a sparkling clone, Pinot clone called 292, and makes a, very, crisp, clean, style of rosé. And it's not only are we making it in 75 centiliters, literally just on Friday we were bottling a few magnums as well, so hopefully you might be able to we'll get you a few of those.
That would be amazing. That's absolutely be the centerpiece of any table during the summer, won't it, this year? Something pretty stunning to put there.
But again, stylistically, the way we would describe this wine is like strawberries and cream. It's like strawberries, strawberry sorbet. So it's got all those lovely sort of, red fruit dimensions, strawberry particularly.
But a delicacy about it. I mean, it's not a fruit bomb. It's got that real sort of elegant, pure fruit flavor, and hints of some watermelon. So it is those real summer flavors. Strawberry, the watermelon.
That's it. I think, no, exactly. I mean, as you said, strawberries and cream really come through, but actually I think it is that those little subtle extra hints, as you said, that watermelon, it gives that little tingle and that sort of pepperiness to it from the watermelon, and I think really adds another layer of complexity to it, which is fantastic, because it's wine that's eminently enjoyable, to enjoy it in the moment, but also, if you want to savor and sip it and intellectualize about it, then it's got a lot going on there to enjoy it, doesn't it? And I know what you say about the colour. I mean, am I right in thinking it's slightly, the 2020 to me is slightly more salmon coloured than in prior years. I don't know if that's just the way the grapes came out, or your winemaking, or maybe I'm imagining it, but to me it's slightly more salmon coloured.
I think that's just I think that's just ripeness. Again, because of low crop, colour of the skins. Even though we're literally hardly macerating, it's just time in the press. It's just picking up a little bit more colour than it would have done in previous years. So, in terms of the aromatics and the way in which the wine's made, it's identical. I just think it's a slight vintage variation.
Yeah, sure. And what would be your food pairing for this wine, for the Railway Hill?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this time of year, it's freshly foraged asparagus, wild asparagus, or against, ultimately, very good for sort of picnic food for salads with, summer salads with feta, pomegranates, things, that sort of thing. But even, something, if you wanted something a little bit, slightly more substantial, something like a seafood risotto, those, again, that influence of the sea, the seafood flavors are going to really pair well with this.
Gosh, you're making my mouth water.
Lunchtime after all.
Absolutely. Very good. All right, wonderful. So that's the whites and the rosé we've done now. So let's move on to the fourth and final one of the 2020s that you've released so far. So that's the Rabbit Hole Pinot Noir. So I'll do the bottle in front of the camera this time. So we've got Rabbit Hole Pinot Noir here. So, I mean, I've got to say, I mean, when I tasted your Rabbit Hole 2018, I mean, I think for me that was the moment I knew that English red wines could be truly world class. Yeah, I mean, the 2018 was exceptional, but I think the 2020 is going to give it a run for its money.
It's fantastic. It is fantastic. And, so 2018 really was the year that, and Charles has already mentioned that, we actually came in, when we bought the land and started the business, it was going to be an entirely sparkling business, and the whole, understanding and I suppose realization that we could make some world-class still wines was fantastic. But I don't think we ever dreamt that we'd be able to make consistent quality red wine like this in the UK. And 2018 really was the year. I mean, it was the year, if you remember, there was the Beast from the East very early. So actually that was good. It meant that the vines didn't, come out of dormancy too soon. We had a fantastic flowering, and then a really warm, glorious summer with just enough rain just to keep things ticking over and maturing. So ultimately for us, that in 2018, the second of our vineyard plantations came on stream into production. And really it was during the vintage when we were tasting this particular, again, Burgundian clone, common theme here, Burgundian clone 115 in our Railway Hill plantation. Very low yields, very super concentration. And it was then...
Sorry to interrupt. Do you manage those yields? I mean, obviously we talked about 2020 with the frost. In a way, the yield was managed a bit for you. But do you do any green harvesting, and do you drop?
Not at that stage. No, the vineyards are so young that naturally it was producing low yields. So it was, I suppose, moderating itself. In future years, it may be something that we have to look at as the vineyards mature. But certainly, your first harvest, you're expecting lower yields anyway, and that amazing growing season had really produced this top quality fruit. But the issue for us was, if we're going to make a red wine, we wanted to be able to destem, and that I think is the key for us. A lot of the English red wines up until had possibly been made from sparkling wine clones. And they had, they'd been whole bunch pressed, and so ultimately had picked up sort of sharp green tannins from the stems and the pips, which just don't get properly ripe. So for us, if we were going to do this red wine project, we needed a destemmer. So we ended up shipping our destemmer from Santa Rosa in the Languedoc, obviously finished harvest down there. So on it went to a pallet and up through France, and got to us literally just in time, so that we could obviously hand pick, hand sort, and then into destemmer, gravity feeding through into fermenters for small production. Then in 2018 we only made about 3,500 bottles. But you're right. I think 2019 was a slightly more challenging year. There was a lot of rain. We weren't able to ramp the volumes up, just because we're very clear that the quality has to be there. We're not going to just increase quantity if we can't get the quality that we're after. But 2020 was a fantastic year for these Burgundian clones.
So I mean, did that give you the opportunity to do something special with 2020? I mean, because you talked about hand sorting and basically selecting the parcels of grapes. So you've got these wines, but I mean, I guess you get the opportunity to really select some super exceptional grapes in 2020.
So what's happened by virtue of the fact of how we've planted them at? So first vineyard site we planted in 2014. Then we took a year out to sort of learn how those various clones and rootstocks, grew on site. And then we planted again in 16 and 17, and actually then again in 19. So we've slowly but surely had pretty much every year a new vineyard site coming on stream. And actually the luxury of that, as Ruth just described, is not only, you've got this frost dimension where you're naturally getting concentration, but every year we've had a new vineyard site, and they're always naturally cropping. It's a little bit like, I would describe them as babies versus teenagers. As babies are all beautiful, right? Then they go through this sort of ugly phase and, in adolescence, and then they come out as these really nice rounded adults. And so every year up until recently, we've always had a really young vineyard site to play with. Mm-hmm. And as Ruth described, this is entirely clone 115, which is sort of Maury Saint-Denis in Burgundy, and that sort of area. And we've had multiple sites since come on stream with that 115. And we've got a new project coming, which you may ask us about later on. We're also playing with a clone called 777, which is not the Boeing aircraft, you'll be pleased to hear, but also a very elegant Pinot clone. So there's so much in clonal selection. There is so much in what we've described with the de-stemming, and also savoir-faire. I mean, we've been making still wine for 20 years, and again we know how to get the best out of them. But we'll be the first to say that no one is more surprised than ourselves. We did not think that making these wines were possible. So we're so delighted. We're so surprised.
Well, yeah, as am I, and as are your customers, I'm sure. But how we talked about the aging potential of the Roman Road. What's your feeling about the Rabbit Hole here? I mean, in a way we don't know, do we? Because you haven't, your vintages are all so young. But do you have a gut feel for how long?
I mean, we'd certainly think that there's enough structure there and elegance to it that we're certainly looking 5 to 10 years easily. But time will tell. As you rightly say, it's very early days for us in England, and therefore we have yet to actually see how these wines improve over time. I mean, certainly, even looking back on the 4 vintages of Roman Road, just going back to that first vintage, it's only getting better in bottles. So again, it comes down to that patience factor and the fact that there's such a lot of pent-up demand that it's going to be difficult to keep it a long time.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, from my perspective as a retailer, it's one thing I think that the industry hasn't got great at yet is kind of holding back stock to see how it matures, whether that be actually the producers or the retailers or even consumers yet. I think people are just, so desperate to get their hands hold of the good stuff, and then they want to drink it. But I do have a dozen bottles of your 2018 Rabbit Hole. I've managed not to sell or drink, so I'm gonna try and keep hold of those and see how that one comes on. But yeah, so as you're saying, Charles, you obviously got these different parcels at different levels of maturity, and this gives you the option, I guess, to try out new things. So my understanding is that there are going to be some other still wines coming out of the 2020 harvest that haven't been released yet, that we haven't got a chance to taste yet. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah, so the exceptional 2020, just I guess motivated by the quality of what we saw, and also winning this platinum best in class award for Roman Road 18 and Decanter was really the motivation. It felt like it had given us permission to try and go to the next level, from 10 to 11, so to speak. So we selected specific parcels, specific clones, and we're going to make a very small amount. There'll be 1,200 magnums of a Chardonnay, still Chardonnay, and 1,200 magnums of a Pinot Noir. And literally, I don't want to give too much away, but they will be Roman Road Plus and they will be Rabbit Hole Plus. And these are all picked by hand. It's the light touches. It's new, 600 liter, barrels that we brought in specifically for these projects. It will be very exclusive. They were riper parcels than Roman Road. So, we've got, I'm pretty sure the Q class Chardonnays is pushing 13. I think the Pinot Noir, is pushing 14. Gotcha. And I think these two wines will really turn heads. I mean, take my word for it. You'll see for yourself.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I would love to see these wines show blind against the finest Burgundy. Yeah, we can't wait to get it out there. The significance of the name Q-Class, again, coming back to the light railway that ran from Canterbury to Folkestone, one of the rolling stock that used to run down that track was a train, a locomotive, an engine called the Q-Class, and we thought it'd be quite fun to, you know, because a lot of the fruit did come from this new vineyard site at Railway Hill. So we're really excited to show you that. It will be launched in time for Christmas. We'll probably take allocations in advance because already there's quite a lot of people stressing interest. I think it's one of those really celebratory wines that you buy a magnum of each and put it away for 10 years because it's going to be something quite fantastic.
It sounds amazing, Charles. So yeah, I really can't wait to see that and to taste it in due course. We'll have to be patient, it seems. Christmas is you know, a long way off at this stage, but yeah, I'm sure that when it comes out, it will create an enormous splash. I mean, given you know, how well your other still wines are doing, I'm sure there's going to be fantastic interest in that from all across the trade. So yeah, really can't wait on that one. Well, look, thanks so much for taking the time to tell me about your 2020 still wines and about where you are on your journey, because it is always a journey, isn't it? Maybe on that we can just sort of finish with what you sort of see as, you know, the future, the next steps really for Simpsons Wine Estate.
Well, I think a big focus for us this year is joining the YNGB sustainability scheme. So it's something that we've obviously wanted to be part of since it was launched last year, but we were just waiting till our vineyards were at an age when we could successfully make that conversion. So we're waiting for our first audit to get full accreditation with the Sustainable Wine Scheme of Great Britain, which is really important for us. We're also we've just actually in the middle of converting 2 additional barns here in Barham, which is going to be more storage facilities, but on those barns we're going to put in a solar photovoltaic array just to make sure that we can actually start to be a little bit more energy self-sufficient going forward. So that's a big focus for us. And I think really with the new launches, Q-Class, the only one we didn't mention actually, which will come out before Q-Class, probably around September time, is our first ever Blanc de Blanc from 2017 vintage. And that's going to be called White Cliffs, obviously a nod to the cliffs down the road from us, and obviously that and the impact of that and importance of the chalk terroir. So we're looking forward to launching that probably around September time, and then really, you know, I think for us it's more about it's having a little bit of that return to normality. We've got vociferous appetite of people coming out to visit. We're inundated with requests for visits, so we're delighted to be able to open our doors again, and hopefully from the 21st of June or shortly thereafter we may be able to reopen our Helter Skelter slide, which has not been COVID friendly, so it's been out of bounds for a rather long time. So I for one am looking forward to going down.
I think there'll be a queue a mile long to get that. I think. Yeah, fantastic. No, well, I mean, yeah, we're all so looking forward to being able to actually get out to the vineyards to do the tastings and everything that comes with it. I know from what you're saying that you're really keen to welcome people back there as well. And let's hope that the sunshine that's recently broken out continues for a long time now through the summer. I think we all deserve it. So yeah, let's see. Let's hope that 2021 continues as it's going on at the moment. Well, look, Ruth and Charles from Simpsons Wine Estate, thanks so much for spending the time with me today.
Have a pleasure.
No problem.